Pelé called soccer the beautiful game, but clearly he'd never played Secret of Mana because this really is supremely beautiful. There's been a few remakes and different versions over the years, but to me the Super NES original from 1993 is still the best. In some ways an absolutely typical, gorgeous 90s 16-bit RPG, and in others quite a bit different. A moody young protagonist with a big sword and a silly haircut sets out on a quest to defeat the ultimate evil in a high fantasy world with a hint of sci-fi. But, well, this is not a turn-based RPG, but an action-oriented one with cooperative multiplayer. What makes this such a pearl, though, is the wonderful world building, the storytelling, all brought to life with superb pixel art and an unforgettable soundtrack. And one thing in this mix really shines. Squaresoft were always S tier when it came to striking intro sequences, but this one might be the king. I won't let the whole thing play out, but what a way to start a journey into lands unknown. And yes, the music plays a massive role in this call to adventure. The opening track, Fear of the Heavens, a heavily sample-based fanfare for video game Nirvana by composer Hiroki Kikuta. Different, but utterly fitting. But something always bothered me about this intro though, something that seems out of place. This image of the three main characters, it's a bit ugly and very blocky. Modern displays aren't always kind to old school pixel art like this, but even with a bit of analog fuzz thrown in when captured from the real hardware, it looks better, but still not great. There's what looks like some compression artifacts around the figures, and just no detail. But recently I happened to see the original Japanese release of this game, and well, the intro is almost identical, but we have a much nicer image. It looks to be the same thing, but zoomed out. Still kind of blocky, but now it's clear that this is a digitised version of the stunning hand-drawn box art. And yes, in Japan, this game is a sequel, Seiken Densetsu 2. The original game is the Game Boy game released as Final Fantasy Adventure in the West. So why on earth did they go with the, to my eyes, crappier version for the English release? They changed the text of the opening crawl to more cromulent English, that makes sense, but why change the image? Well, the Cutting Room Floor wiki site clued me in on this. There's two layers here, the background image and the actual title logo. Without the text, we can see that the image has a blurred bit around where the logo would be. This is presumably a bit of a graphic design trick to make it easier to read. Japanese kanji characters are complex and the busy detail of the background might have thrown people off. So what happens when we lay the English logo over the Japanese image? Yeah, okay, it does look pretty terrible, but it doesn't take that much to fix it. Just move the logo up a bit to the same position as the Japanese original, and it looks fine. So why didn't they do this or any other obvious solution that might spring to mind? Is there some sort of technical reason? Well, comments from the aforementioned composer Hiroki Kikuta give some insight into the intro sequence. Let's take a look at it from another viewpoint. Here we can see the image being decompressed from the ROM into the video memory, and it takes a while. In fact, it only just finishes in time for the big reveal. This is a 256 colour picture with no repeating elements, which would take up a lot of space on the cartridge, so it's shrunk with a compression algorithm along with most of the rest of the graphics for this game to allow it all to fit onto a 2MB ROM chip. Actually, the whole intro sequence was written around this. The main image is slowly revealed because that's how long it takes to decompress it and load it in. The Super NES's processor really isn't that fast, so it takes a long time to unpack the compressed data, and it was only afterwards that the music was composed to fit this. That swell that gives you chills, a happy accident. But does this explain the problem? Is it related to compression? It could be. Two important things to note. Firstly, this isn't literally the exact same image enlarged in Paint Shop Pro or whatever they were using in 1993. The English version has detail on the figures that the Japanese one doesn't. It's messy, but it's not something that would be revealed just by enlargement. The image also goes further down below the branch they're standing on. It's the same source most likely, but zoomed and cropped in a different way. It's also a bit smaller, maybe that's important. Also, the English version decompresses much faster than the Japanese one. It gets done with more time to spare. That could be the reason they did this for the European PAL release. PAL consoles run slower, maybe this was necessary. Let's have a race with the three versions side by side. And, well, the PAL version is actually the fastest. It's not struggling to keep up. That does make sense. The PAL system's CPU is a tiny bit slower and its graphics chip runs at 50 frames per second, not 60, which can make games that aren't adapted to PAL systems run more slowly. But the slower frame rate means that it has more time between frames to do calculations, so number crunching stuff like this will often work faster. So it does decompress faster, but it doesn't seem to need to for any special reason. I really thought that might be it, but it can't be. It could just be that this was a quick, simple bodge to hide the problem with the blurry bar. A few sources, including the cutting room floor, do suggest that. The English localization of this game was done very quickly, perhaps to get the game out in time for the 1993 Christmas season. Maybe this was the easiest solution they could come up with in the time they had, but it seems like there would be even easier options they could have gone with. And if that is the case, well, they zoomed in more than they needed to, and they seem to have reduced the effective resolution way more than they could have done by accident. They also seem to have reduced the colour palette too, and we've already seen that the image is smaller, and there's those compression artifacts. So is this compressed more to save more space? Maybe to fit the English text in? It could well be that. Translator Ted Woolsey said he had to make a lot of cuts, partly to get the text to fit in with the fixed width fonts they were stuck with, but also in an interview he mentioned a lack of ROM space too, so this would all line up. It could even be that the blurry bit on the Japanese original was to save a bit of space rather than to just improve the look. That could be how this compression system works. The real smoking gun would be to compare how the space in the ROM file is used. Did they need that extra bit? I don't think anything else got compromised in the same way, but I can't find this info online, and working it out myself would take more time than I want to put into it. The code is really complex, but if you do know, well, please tell me in the comments. The way this background image is compressed does seem to be different than the other graphics compression used in the rest of the game, which has been well described online. But even without the better image, the title sequence is still stunning. It caught my attention definitely, and it didn't stop this game becoming legendary in the West. It's a clever sidestepping of a technical restriction that ended up becoming quite captivating. So that is the intro, but there is an actual game to go with it too. How about I look at some of the cool things that does? Because there are some really nice effects here, including a lot of transparency related stuff like the atmospheric clouds or mystic vapour or whatever it is that appears here and in quite a few places. Lots of Super NES games did similar things, A Link to the Past, even on day one, Super Mario World, but here it looks really specially nice. So what's happening here is there are two background layers, one being the standard RPG 2D top-down stuff, and another layer of clouds. The Super NES is very advanced for the time. Graphics processor is responsible for the magic that happens by laying the clouds over the top as a sort of translucent filter. Modern game systems do this sort of thing without breaking into a sweat, but back then it was unusual in a home console. Most of the time, graphics on the screen max out at 256 colours, but adding a filter like this increases that by quite a lot potentially. The colours that result from this translucency effect aren't bound by the usual colour palette. Another memorable part of the adventure is navigating that huge world on Flammy the Dragon. Yes, it wouldn't be a Squaresoft RPG without some sort of way to whiz around the map. And of course this is that Super NES Special Mode 7, not at all rare but nicely done here and with a bit of a twist. You can change the altitude and the viewpoint, go down far enough and you even switch into a straight top-down view. And actually this gives us an insight into how Mode 7 works. You see, in the Super NES's memory, the landscape is just a top-down 2D map that looks like this. It's a bit messy when you move around as new data is being pasted in. In the low altitude top-down mode, the whole screen is just at a fixed zoom level. Move around or rotate and the flat map scrolls by appropriately. When you go into higher altitude, we get a perspective view with the map projected as a landscape stretching away. It uses some more transparency stuff to add a haze to the horizon too, to complete the picture. I've talked about Mode 7 landscapes like this and how they work in another video which I'll post a link to below if you want to take a look. Another little feature, weird but still sort of impressive, is the world map. Yes, hit start whilst riding Flammy, a really terrible name, but hit start whilst riding him and you will get this map. The curious thing about this, apart from the fact that it is, well, plain and unadorned, but also rotating is instant and smooth, but moving up or down, that is very jerky and takes a long time. What's going on? Well, this is once again Mode 7, and in Mode 7 you can rotate an image with no hassle at all, but, well, surely you can scroll around in them too. We've just seen a very smooth Mode 7 landscape. Well, this is Mode 7 used in a weird way. Mode 7 backgrounds are made up of a grid of 128 by 128 graphics tiles, each one 8 by 8 pixels, like this landscape. But with the world map, each tile is just one solid colour, making it into a single pixel effectively. Why do this? Well, it turns Mode 7 into a sort of fast bitmap display that lets you do software rendering tricks like this. Here, the flat 2D map of the world is projected onto a sphere shape. When you rotate the map, the Mode 7 processor handles it. But when you move around though, the whole map has to be redrawn from scratch, which takes about 30 frames or half a second. Jurassic Park did something similar for very different reasons, which again I discussed in another video which I will link to. Secret of Mana programmer Nasir Gabelli was fond of little tricks like this, and he did some interesting things in his career, and, well, Secret of Mana was a great showcase of his abilities and pioneering approach. In fact, this is his last game ever. After developing games for just over a decade, he retired on the royalties, and I don't blame him if he could. So this has been a quick trawl through some of the tech of Secret of Mana, some digital archaeology. There's more secrets in Secret of Mana, I'm quite sure, but this is what I have been able to uncover. If you've never played this game, well, it really does still hold up. It's a wonderful game and incredibly atmospheric. The Switch version collection of Mana does stay pretty true to the originals if you want to try that. It does have all 3 games in the original console trilogy. So once again, thank you to my Patreons. If anyone else out there would like to join them, there is also a link below. That would be amazing. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and maybe give me a like too. And I will say thanks for watching and goodbye.